Happy Mother's Day, everybody. So, I am not a mother, but I am a creator. We are all creators, right? And our talk today is Mary Magdalene, the mystic and the mentor. And when I chose this talk, I've done this talk 3 years ago. I did this talk. So if any of you are like me, you might not remember all of it. You'll remember maybe some of it, but there's new stuff because I made the decision to do this, or I didn't make a decision. Spirit spoke to me, and this is the talk that came through. But then, after that, I got an email about Easter, seeing Easter through Mother Mary. And I signed up for it. It's like a 5-week course. I'm really excited about it. But Thursday night was the first night of the class, and it was all about Mary Magdalene. And I'm like, oh, this is so perfect, because now I can incorporate some of this great stuff about her. And just to let you know, so Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, they are all representative of the divine feminine Christ energy. It's called Sophia. The Sophia is the divine feminine Christ energy. So, and back then, when Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary were of age, Mary, actually, that name was symbolic of a priestess or a goddess or somebody that holds that holy space. So there were actually a lot of them, and you'll hear that there are other Marys within the Bible. But I'm going to talk about some of her story, or her history, of her gospel, and also of Mary Magdalene, and of her gospel's message, which is really quite profound, and a summary of what we are to do with this information today in our lives. So her gospel was discovered. It was buried in a large clay jar in the desert in Egypt in 1869 and was left for the care of a Berlin museum. And the scholars generally dated it to the 2nd century CE, which is Common Era, which is after death, and possibly earlier as an oral tradition, but the exact date is not known when it was written. But it was written in Sahidic Coptic language, and it was translated, and it was sent to a printer. But the printer's pipes burst, and the translation was destroyed. The next translation was ready to go to print in 1943, and then World War I broke out. So the first printed edition of her gospel was published in 1955. And it's the only gospel, or the teaching of Christ, that was written by a woman. And it gives us a different, clearer perspective of the Christian message that Jesus was teaching. Her gospel was suppressed by Constantine when he became emperor of Rome in 324 CE. And he declared Christianity the religion of the entire Roman Empire, and also decided which texts would be standards of the church and which would be suppressed. So there's no hard evidence that he completely suppressed Mary's gospel. However, he did preside over the council where texts deemed heretical and non-conforming to the New Orthodox, where some of them were excluded from the Bible. And the bishops who disagreed with him, they were exiled on the spot. So once he made the choice, that was it. That's what went into the Bible. But in the 4 Gospels that we do know, the text that has been approved by Constantine have details about Mary Magdalene that are very clear. She was the only woman besides Mother Mary that was mentioned. And Jesus heals Mary Magdalene of 7 demons, which we will talk about later. She's one of the 3, along with Mother Mary and John the Apostle, that wait at the foot of the cross during Jesus' crucifixion. And this is a very important lesson, that Mary Magdalene was with Jesus during the crucifixion and then at the tomb, and was the first to see Jesus resurrect from the tomb. She was the first name that he called out after his resurrection. Now, I mentioned this last week at the Easter service. Through this, Mary was embodied presence of love and devotion. And she was at the tomb and present with her love that is deeply connected to Jesus. And her grief opened her up more. She was there. Think about this. This was her teacher for 3 years. And it was all of their teachers, but the only ones that were there were the women and John the Apostle. And she was in such grief and crying and just opening up. And I don't know, I've talked about this before, Jintsugi, which is that Japanese pottery that when it's broken, it's mended with gold. And that's what happens every time we break our heart and we heal. It's like we're expanded. And the gold is symbolic of the value of what we learned from that grief or from whatever it is that we had to experience. So she's in her body and in her emotions and in her heart, trusting her body, whereas other people would want to analyze it rather than being in her feelings. So in the Sophia Christ, in the spiritual organ of perception, that's the heart. And in a new way with the feminine can bring what the feminine can bring to the masculine energy coming from the heart. But her role as first witness to the resurrection makes her the apostle to the apostles, as affirmed by church fathers like Augustine and more recently acknowledged by the Catholic Church in 2016 when Pope Francis elevated her feast day to the same rank as the other apostles. Yay. The Bible information gave the translators enough to know that Mary Magdalene was very significant in the life of Jesus. Now, before that, when she was born, Mary Magdalene's mother privately maintained her worship of the divine feminine. Her mother was a wealthy woman, which was very uncommon in those days. And during her pregnancy, Mary Magdalene's mother received messages that the birth of her child was the birth of a returning prophet. And as a child, Mary Magdalene was innately gifted within the channeling and healing arts, as well as having very sharp intellect. She was born as an awakened being. Her parents encouraged her to cultivate strong inner practices of meditation and self-mastery before regularly interacting with the civilization she was about to liberate. Most young women of this time were encouraged to get married, but she passed. She said she wanted to study and did extensively with her mother and traveled with her father to secretly train at mystic schools in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India. She would see into people's hearts, and her heart would ache from the suffering that she saw. Her throat would physically tighten as she witnessed the pain of suppression of women. Yearly, Mary Magdalene would return to the Essene monastic life of Mount Carmel, where she studied. This is a Jewish sect where the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls came from. At Mount Carmel, Mother Mary was Mary Magdalene's primary teacher and mentor. Mother Mary could see that Magdalene was a natural spiritual evolutionary longing to serve her divine purpose. She also knew it would require a sophisticated set of skills in order to safely speak her truth as a public and female speaker. Magdalene was on a journey of self-mastery. Mother Mary took her under her wing to help her master these skills needed to be the divine feminine Christ leader she was to become. Mary Magdalene realized the leadership role is why she had a lifelong inner drive for spiritual training. Her training was essential as a divine feminine Christ teacher embodiment in order to be capable of leading both men and women. The container of Jesus' public ministry would create the opportunity and the physical protection for Mary Magdalene to walk as a woman, offering her direct teachings in collaboration with Jesus. Deciding who Jesus was for herself was an important step in opening her heart to follow his lead and take up the opportunity to teach by his side. She intuitively experienced his own embodiment of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which was the best use of her gifts and life force. Jesus and Mary Magdalene met at the wedding of Cana when he turned water into wine. She recognized his Christ embodiment, and they shared a similar resonance and a similar frequency. She recognized that her lifelong work, studying with her mom and then his mom, allowed her to be in the same vibration as Jesus. And they became close friends, and possibly more than that. The relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus was something that proved Jesus to be 100% human and 100% divine. In the Bible, we tend to see him as divine, but his relationship with Mary helped us to see both of them as 100% divine and 100% human. And by the way, we are all 100% divine and 100% human. I know it's hard to believe sometimes, but we are. In their working together, Mary Magdalene reports to never feel she was beneath Jesus or servitude to him. His integrity was immaculate, and his devoted acts for reconciling the divine feminine went above and beyond every day. Their spiritual alliance encoded humanity's collective conscious with a template for the reconciliation of the divine masculine and the divine feminine Christ energies. Together, they went on to teach and heal both men and women. They needed each other to reach both men and women. Mary made women feel safe to be healed by and to follow Jesus, and Jesus made men feel it was safe to be healed by Mary. They worked together until Jesus' death, and then both Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary fled to France for fear of their life. Mary Magdalene prophesied that her name would be maligned and hidden for an entire dark age. She also saw that her reputation would not be restored until thousands of years later, when the voices of women ushering in the new age would discover, recover, and remember the truth of the divine feminine Christ embodiment. Her maligned reputation as a prostitute came from Pope Gregory I by a homily that he delivered in year 591 CE, and he declared that she and the unnamed woman in Luke 7 are, in fact, one and the same, and that she would be held as a whore. The label took hold and was held for so long because it did two things. It served the early church fathers by undermining the teachings associated with Mary, and it undermined women's capacity to take on leadership roles. So this label stuck for many years until 1969, when the Catholic Church officially repealed Gregory's labeling of Mary Magdalene as a whore and admitted their error. This correction still goes unnoticed by some. So her gospel, the message from Mary's gospel is about loving oneself, having self-worth, believing in yourself, and all of this comes from listening to your heart. Mary's gospel says 7 is the number of powers we need to confront within ourselves to reach a clarity or singularity of heart that lets us see past the ego of what's more real, infinite, already here and within us. These are darkness, craving, ignorance, craving for death, enslavement to the physical body, the false peace of the flesh, and the compulsion of rage. These are all precursors to the 7 deadly sins. Now, these are the places that we get stuck, the states of mind that we can compel us to act in ways that are indicative of who we are. The Bible says Jesus healed Mary of 7 demons, 7 deadly sins of pride, lust, envy, anger, covetousness, gluttony, and sloth. If her purification is viewed this way, it makes her the most thoroughly sanctified person mentioned in the New Testament, as well as the first person that Jesus healed. Now imagine being completely cleansed of old grudges, illusions, hereditary obstacles, of health, and of all negative desires. Her gospel was 19 pages, but it begins on page 7. Pages 1 through 6 are missing, as well as pages 11 through 14. And nobody knows their content. And her gospel is really a dialogue between her and Jesus. At the end of page 10, Mary is talking to the resurrected Jesus, and the gospel reads, Lord, I see you now in this vision. Now, he's been resurrected. So some people were afraid or couldn't see him. So he answered, you are blessed, for the sight of me does not disturb you. For where nous is, which is the portal of the heart, there lies the treasure. Then Mary said, Jesus, when someone meets you in a moment of vision, is it through the soul or the mind that they see you, or is it through spirit? Jesus said, it is neither through the soul nor the spirit, but the mind between the two which sees the vision, and it is this which, and then there's no more pages. Sorry. Fill in the blank. But her message of the gospel of Mary is inner vision and healing. Her gospel emphasizes inner spiritual knowledge. self-worth, and freedom from ego-based suffering. The 7 powers, these can be understood as psychological, spiritual blockages, precursors that we call later the 7 deadly sins. And also it talks about there is no original sin. I don't know if any of you were raised with that idea, but I was, that you were born with original sin. And she says that's not the truth. One of the Gospel's radical points is that sin is not inherent, but it is a result of ignorance and misperception. Now, how the apostles handled Mary is not so great in the beginning, especially with Andrew. He questioned what Mary was saying that Jesus said. When Mary went to tell the apostles of Jesus' resurrection, they refused to believe her first. They were upset because they realized there are teachings that Jesus gave her that Jesus did not give them. They argued. They expressed disbelief and contempt that Jesus could reveal such powerful teachings to a woman and not them. Peter is especially angry. He asks, "Must we change our customs and now listen to a woman?" Did he really choose her and prefer her over us? Mary wept. She said, "Do not let your hearts remain in doubt, for a heart in doubt becomes useless as the organ in the realignment to reconnect to the grace he has promised us." So it's our heart that reconnects with God, reconnects to that higher part of ourselves. It is as simple as opening to his presence right then and there. For those who seek him, there will find him. Mary reminds them, he has prepared us for this, to become complete human, to become more human, more available to receive our limitlessness. And it was Levi, the apostle, who comes to Mary's defense and says, if Jesus considered her worthy, then who are you to disagree? He adds, because Jesus knew her completely and loved her steadfastly, let us grow as he demanded of us and walk forth to spread the gospel without trying to lay down any rules and laws other than those he witnessed. And so they did. Some other points of her gospel are, ascension is a journey into the heart. It's not about ascending up, it's about going within. Ascension is about stepping into your full divine embodiment of who you are. Descent into your heart, so further up is really deeper within. We are here to attain the freedom our soul remembers and our spirit knows. Her gospel says that we are inherently good, same as Jesus is. Jesus says, acquire my peace within yourself. In other words, don't worship me, become like me. Jesus also says there is no such thing as sin. We just miss the mark. Sin is what we produce in ourselves when we miss the mark, what we do to ourselves when we forget. The modern implications of the divine feminine is there are other women, other Marys, like the title priestess, sacred sister, one who keeps watch or tends the threshold and anoints. Mary's discovered story empowers both women and men to reconnect with their divine nature, to reconnect with their heart. The relationship between Mary and Jesus, seen through a mystic lens, models balance between the masculine and feminine, not hierarchy. Her teachings remind us that ascension is internal and self-knowledge is the path to freedom. Mary's gospel reminds us when we block our heart, we block the voice from within, the vision of love that is within us. It is that ancient divide, the idea that there is human and there is divine and they are separated and one is higher than the other. That is not the truth. The powers of the ego, the 7 powers, Mary says we must overcome, keep us separate from love, from the truth of who we are. It is about love that comes from understanding the worth inherent in being human, the worthiness of being human. In disregarding Mary and forgetting who she was to Jesus, we disregard the aspect in us that is fluent with the angels and that is fluent with our heart's desire. This is the love that brings us back to life, to real life. So what does this mean in my life? What does it mean in your life? Well, life is about growing and elevating our consciousness, but we need to listen deeply. We need to go in to elevate up. As a woman, suppression has been going on for eons. It is part of our DNA, and it is time to heal from it. This is the new age for both men and women. It is time to go into our hearts and come from hearts to find unconditional love and complete joy in this lifetime. It is time to cultivate a sense of self-worth. We cannot believe in ourselves if we do not remember we are worthy of that belief. Love is the answer, as Andrea would say on Wednesday nights, and many musicians say, love is the answer. We are love. Both Mary and Jesus knew this, and they were connected in a way we do not experience yet. Acquiring a vision that allows us to see what has always been within us is transformative growth and requires faith and requires courage. So call upon that strength to keep the faith, even when it feels like you are still in the dark age. We don't need to become someone else. We just need to see what has always been within us. It is not about quantity in life. It is about quality of life and the intensity of our existence. Connection to our own expression of God that is within in each and every one of us. It is about being present and waking up to what brings us joy. Joy is complete satisfaction here and now, so we do not long continually for external things to make us happy and joyous. We find joy when we absolutely know the unity with the Spirit, which is universal joy. So what feeds your heart? What brings you joy? Now, Unity's principles 4 and 5 says use prayer and meditation to ascend yourself, to delve into your heart, to rise above, and do this by going in and shining your light. So my final reflection, Mary Magdalene's story, especially as revealed in her gospel, is not just historical recovery. It's a spiritual reclaiming. It calls us to, this is a new way of being. Not only 100% divine and 100% human, but to restore the balance between masculine and feminine energies within us. It's living from a heartfelt way of being. To recognize your inner divinity rather than seek external salvation. And listen deeply to your heart, which is the seat of divine knowing. So I want to say thank you. I'm your sister in prayer, possibility, and power. I miss you, I appreciate you, and I love you. Until we meet again, know that you are blessed and a blessing.